As it says on the screen, I'm Stuart Baker. I'm Business Development Director at Solent Local Enterprise Partnership. Also been working heavily on the Freeport as well. But here today to talk about how we're going to translate that strategy that Rachel talked about earlier, Solent 2050, into a kind of initial funding opportunities, because it's great to have a strategy that sort of sets the direction of travel to 2050 in a very dynamic and changing world. But actually, what can we do as an LEP with our investment to support businesses on that journey to unlock new jobs and unlock their growth aspirations as well? So I've got a screen down here as well I can look at. That's pretty good. Right, okay. So we're going to talk about, I'm quite short, so I'm going to move these down. Solent Prosperity Loan Fund is the first one. So we've got a couple of funds we're going to talk about here today. Some of the slides will be a little repetitive because the strategic focus of them, as you heard from Solent 2050, remains the same across both of the funding products. But the first one that we're going to talk about is the Solent Prosperity Loan Fund. So overall, we have a sort of £5 million funding pot available for that. And this is initial. So we've got, as an LEP, we've been pretty clever with our funding that we've had from government, that we've earned to have it come into us. We've issued some as loans, it's come back to us, and we've got quite a lot of flexibility to direct that funding to support local priorities, whereas previously money's come from government and said, look, you've got to do it this way, this is what we want you to deliver with your funding. Now our board has actually got quite a lot of flexibility to tailor that to the local environment. Now, we're making initially £5 million available from our funds for this particular fund. We're hoping to provide funding to at least 5 projects. It may be more, okay? But it's just to try and give a benchmark within that. Now, it's loan funding. We don't give grant funding anymore at the moment. Or we may come up with a startup grant product later in the year, but we don't have it at the moment. And this is all about loan funding today. And for this particular product, it's between 100k and £1 million. Now, the contribution we can make to a project is 50% of the total project costs. Okay, so the maximum obviously we can provide is £1 million, and you'd need to come forward with your remaining funding for your project as well, because we think it's important that obviously the sort of business has skin in the game on that as well. 0% interest is the key attractive feature of this, repayable over 36 months, and then within that 36 months there's an opportunity for a 12-month repayment holiday. So pretty favourable terms to secure some funding for a project. Capital projects only, so it's not available to sort of support wages or cash flow. And this is available to the private sector, so businesses, but also FE and HE institutions as well, recognising that skills and having that talent pipeline come through is really important for our economy. We've deliberately, we're a business-led organisation at the LEP, so businesses and supporting businesses is really important to us. And I think we've seen locally that there's been quite a lot of money that's been directed by government through Levelling Up Fund, through UK Shared Prosperity Fund, to local authority. So whereas in the past we've sort of said, look, anyone can come and get some funding from us, actually now we're saying, no, actually we want to support businesses in particular, but HE and FE institutions for this particular fund as well. We'll pause at the end to go through some questions on this. There we go. Moving across. Yep, brilliant. Okay, so just a little bit more about the loan product itself. So I said it's 0% interest. What we do charge, and it's the same if you go for a mortgage and stuff, there's always an admin fee. It costs us to process. There is resource in the office that's reviewing applications, taking them through due diligence, doing financial due diligence, and also obviously transacting the contract as well, the funding agreement. So there is a cost to that we need to bear. So there's a 2.5% admin fee charged on the cost of the loan. That's repayable. That's payable once you're successful, but upfront and doesn't come out of the loan. So you're not going to pay that and then potentially not get a loan. That's not how it's going to work. I've already mentioned it's 36-month repayment term. In exceptional circumstances, we may look at up to 5 years repayment, but it would need to be for the particular project. I know some of our board members were acutely aware that some projects, particularly in relation to sort of green initiatives, can have a longer repayment period in terms of making them sort of generate revenue. So we wanted to just leave the door open for that. So if that's something that's of interest to your project, do come and have a chat with us, to get in contact with our growth hub. But generally, we're looking at sort of 3 years. And within that, there is an opportunity for a 12-month holiday. I just realised I haven't introduced James, who's not just taken one of the seats on the stage, which is a bit strange. But James is from our accountable body. So Portsmouth City Council are our accountable body, and James Fitzgerald will answer any tough questions on the sort of finance aspects of it. So that's why he's on the stage here. Sorry, James. Very comfortable seats. So in terms of this, as an LEP, our board are really keen that the funding that they've got actually delivers the kind of growth that aligns with Solent 2050. Now, every area and every economy will have its strategic and sort of sectoral strengths, and government are very clear that they want areas to back their strategic strengths. For us, we're here in the Horizon Cruise Terminal. The maritime sector is massively important to us in the Solent. It's 20% of our economy, generates £7.7 billion of economic output. So huge. And it's engines such as the Port of Southampton, Port of Portsmouth, etc., that really do fuel that as well as the whole wealth of SMEs as well. So maritime's always important to us, but it's not all about the maritime sector in the Solent as well. There's a whole range of other sectors that make up the economy and that are really important and that are flourishing and doing well. So you can see on the slide there a whole list of sectors, and these are the sectors that our board have said, look, we particularly want to focus our funding in supporting these particular areas of growth. We want to create jobs, so we want our funding to unlock new jobs. We want it to potentially strengthen skills provision as well. We've talked about that kind of talent deficit and making sure that the jobs that are created in local areas, in the Solent, are for local people. We don't want to bring labour in where we have to, when we've got young people here who have got sort of futures ahead of them. Why do we want to lose them to elsewhere? Let's retain that talent here in the Solent. So if there's projects that can support them, that's really good. With this fund as well, we'll also provide enabling infrastructure. As an LEP, we've provided enabling infrastructure for the last 10 years, whether it's at North Whiteley, where we've provided a new sort of highway infrastructure to unlock 3,500 houses, to lots of other projects here as well. We've talked about, was it Bobby Big Plugs, wasn't it? I think the sort of the shore power. This is all enabling infrastructure. So we're really happy to do that. Along the water side, just across the river as well, there's digital infrastructure going in that we've been able to support as well. So those kind of projects as well. And also, supporting that transition to net zero. That is a backdrop. And you look at any kind of funding call that's coming out from government as well. We all have to do this within the sort of spirit of thinking about, what is the future and how do we adapt to climate change and how do we reduce the amount of carbon that we're putting into the atmosphere. So strategic focus, we saw the video this morning where it sort of listed these it sort of ran through the sort of 7 strategic priorities we've set as an LEP for our area. I won't list them there, but we will share these slides later, but you'll see it in the bidding prospectus, which will be available now online. But nothing really surprising there, really. Obviously, that marine sector is important to us. But that whole idea of a sort of coastal community, and I think the theme that runs through this is around levelling up that we've heard as well. We've heard lots of people say it's not just about levelling up the north. We're very acutely aware that there are communities within the Solent, within the Isle of Wight, within Southampton, Portsmouth, Gosport, etc., that really do need to be part of that levelling up agenda. So where we're able to support businesses, to provide people with jobs, and to actually give that kind of new hope really to areas is really important for us as well. Eligibility. So this gets into some of the detail. There's a bit more criteria, but what we've tried to just pull out here is some of the sort of headline elements around eligibility. So you need to be a company that's domiciled in the UK, paying tax in the UK. That's really important to this fund, or a higher education or further education establishment here in the Solent. The economic outputs. We're kind of brazenly selfish about this. If we're investing our funding, we want the outputs to be here in the Solent. So if you're going to, if you want funding to develop a project that's going to create jobs in Cornwall, quite frankly, that's great, brilliant for Cornwall, but it's not good for our money, and we're not going to be. That won't be a project that we'll support. We want jobs here in the Solent for our communities. We want this money to start working really quickly. We're sort of coming off the back of COVID. it's great that we're sort of coming out of the other side of that, but it's still a dynamic environment, and we want to get those new jobs, those new projects kicked off as quickly as possible. So there is always going to be a focus on early delivery, and we sort of set there that we want people to be or projects to start by the end of March next year, which is quite ambitious, really. We're stood here, so it's June now, so less than a year away, sort of going through the process, getting a funding agreement, and sort of getting things away. So we're really and looking at projects to complete by June 24. So that's the kind of sort of period that we're looking at. I think, and I can't see any board members here, but I think the board will probably see how this product goes and may well come forward with a second round of this at another time. That's my sense. We'll certainly have funding there. And obviously it's a loan product. There's money coming back to us so we can get it out working for the economy again, which is what we want to do. It's really important so that if a project's going to make that sort of March 23 deadline to start, that you've got the consents, you've got the funding in place. I mean, I've been working at the Elect for about 9 years now, and me and James have seen a whole load of applications come through that you think, wow, this looks fantastic, this is brilliant, this is going to be a game changer for the area. But they're pulled down because they don't have the planning consent in place, or actually all the funding that they need for their portion of the project isn't in place as well. So we can't take that forward, which is always desperately disappointing for us, but it's just a reality of a project. So we don't want to waste our time, we don't want to waste your time. So got to have those consents in place, got to have your funding in place by December 22, or a very, very clear and immediate path to having those consents and funding in place. We obviously want the money to be paid back to us because we want this money to go in and start working again for another business in the economy over the next 3 years as well. That's what we want. It doesn't come back in and sit in a bank, it goes and does something. So we need to have that comfort that it is definitely repayable. So that's something that particularly our accountable body will look at as part of the financial due diligence aspect of it. And need to offer non-personal security on this. We always sort of highlight that, so need to make sure that we can recover our funding if the worst comes to the worst. We never want to do that, of course. We want to support businesses, but the reality is that money could be used by another business in the area, so we need to have that comfort in there as well. Okay, Solent LEP area. I heard a lot about the Solent LEP area today, and I think we have seen some maps, particularly in the Freeport slide, but just to be clear, that is the Solent LEP area on there, and that's where we need the outputs, and that's where businesses or FEH institutions that are looking to secure funding from this loan fund need to be and deliver their outputs in. Come on, clicker. So application process, I think probably the final slide, and then we'll sort of perhaps pause for some questions on it, is, as it is on the screen, that's quite a wordy slide looking at it here actually, but essentially we're launching today. So if you go onto our website, you will see the bidding prospectus, have a read through that. We've just given a snapshot of some of those headlines today, but the bidding prospectus on there, it's not a massively weighty document. We're trying to make it accessible, we're trying to make it easier for businesses, because we know you've got your businesses to run, but ultimately there is a process to go through. Have a read through of that. If you've got any questions, there's an email address, or you can call our growth hub as well, who will be happy to talk you through the process. The first part of the process is, and again it's trying to make things easier, is an expression of interest process. So it's an Excel spreadsheet form that's quite easy to go through. If you can't answer those questions and don't have the information for those questions, this probably isn't the product for you at this time, because it's pretty simple and fundamental questions you should be able to answer if you've got a project that's going to be starting to deliver in March next year. So have a look through that, sign it off, etc. Get that into us, and we've only got about just over a month, I think, to sort of get those in. So it's quite a tight window to get that expression of interest in. We'll do a review of those expressions of interest, and then those that are eligible, and we'll see how many we get as well, because we may get hundreds. I suspect we won't, but we'll go through those, and then we'll then invite businesses to go through the full application process. Now, that full application process, we'll publish that form, obviously, and make it available to those shortlisted businesses or FEH institutions. But it will be based on sort of the Greenbrook Treasury process as well. And it's important because this is public funding. So it's really important for us that we have projects that demonstrate the value for money that they're providing to essentially the public purse, really. So we go through that process. Obviously, it's a loan fund as well. So there's some additional questions that perhaps a traditional government business case wouldn't ask, because it's loan funding. We need to understand security and payback ability of funding as well. So so people will be invited to that, and then you've got until sort of end of September to get that in. So that's quite a long window, and obviously we're mindful that summer's in between, where people, quite rightly go off on holidays, and you actually can have a holiday this year, can't you? Which is great. So then we'll take that through our finance funding performance management group, who will make a decision. But before that, we actually do quite a lot of work in terms of the accountable body looking at the financial due diligence aspects of it. But also we commission out independent experts on due diligence as well, who look at this. They're independent from us as well, who look at this with an independent view and make some recommendations. Now, through that process, it's very likely that some questions will be raised that we need to then have a dialogue with applicants on to get questions. So we don't just want to think, okay, you haven't really answered that the way we want, so we can't take your application forward. We actually want to work with you to get the application to a place where it is something that we can provide you with an offer of funding for. So it's a kind of collaborative process. Obviously, we've got some deadlines to meet, so it's kind of important that you do come back, in good time with those. And obviously, if you can't, then it probably isn't the funding product for you. And hopefully, there's lots of other projects that we can invest in. And yeah, I would think by the end of this year, you would have a funding offer in your possession and a contract that is signed by both parties, and that should enable you to sort of get those spades in the ground or whatever it is by March next year. So that's the kind of process we're working to. I think there is, if I pause, so that's our Solent Prosperity Fund. It's the fund that's got loan funding available between 100k and $1 million. The next one is more targeted at SMEs, and it's going to be focused on sort of 15 to 99k. So very similar. So I'll whiz through that, but I can either pause there and answer any questions if there are any, or actually just slopey shoulder them to James, to be honest. Or I can go on to the next one. I can see a question already. Yeah. Do we got microphones? So we have got microphones. Brilliant.
Are there any restrictions on how we use the money, or can a project include a new marketing endeavour?
Can it include what, sorry?
A new marketing effort.
A new marketing?
Effort.
Yeah, it's I mean, what we're... Do you want to come in? It's sort of it's not working capital, is it?
No, it's not. So the funding is available for sort of capital expenditure only. Sometimes you can capitalise things like that, but if it's just for a marketing effort, then I don't think this is a fund for you. No.
Okay, yeah, we'll just go there, and then we'll go to Rob over there.
Is it okay if I jump in?
Yeah, of course.
You've mentioned that the LEP has a key aim of creating jobs. Do you have a cost per job in mind?
We don't for this fund, and we've deliberately done that. We kind of just want to... I think what we've done with recent loan products is we've over-specified them, and we've not had a lot of applications in, quite honestly. So we kind of just wanted to leave it quite open. Traditionally, what we've looked at in terms of cost per jobs, and this was for grants, so you might have come in, but we've always looked at around sort of 6k per job was the kind of the sort of...
That used to be our sort of premium that we really like to have. But so, as Stu said, this one hasn't been over-specified. I think we'd look at the outputs in general, as it just forms part of your business case. So I think you'd look at the project more holistically rather than a specific cost per job. And
I think the thing to add to that, so where we listed that the kind of economic outputs that we're looking to secure, it's at least one of them. So it could be that your product, you're looking to bring in a new bit of kit, for example, that means you're reducing your carbon output, for example. And that might not be in any jobs at all. Still good, Okay? Does that help? Yeah? Okay. Nicola, I think Rob had a question over there.
Yeah, Rob Stevens. We're looking at a tidal project. Your aims of infrastructure and maritime are really commendable and obviously fit very well with the local workforce, but your timelines for delivering that are almost exclusive, make it slightly exclusive, because actually trying to deliver an infrastructure and a maritime project by 2024 is very tight indeed. Is there any flexibility on that date?
There's not on this one. These are the timelines for the fund, so it's open and everybody's clear on what the timelines are for the fund. As I said, I'm pretty sure that the board will reflect on feedback such as that and say, actually, is there scope for a round two? do we need to think, actually, we have a bit of funding that we might say, okay, there's different types of project that need a longer lead in, that take a bit longer time. So it's kind of helpful to have that. But for this round, it is as specified in there. And we will get projects that we can fund within that period. And I think it's about getting that funding working as quickly as possible. That's kind of where the board we're at. But we'll take that on board, Rob. That's
just add a little bit of detail to that.
Yeah.
One of the things I thought of there is, would you be allowed to take your 12-month payment holiday if you were a technology innovation of that nature, because that's not going to make a return for some time, and effectively defer your first payment for 12 months after the initiation of the project, which adds another year into the cycle. I mean, I know that's a bit of detail you may not have considered. But,
so it's what, 12 months on top of the 36?
No, you've got your 36, but you would have a holiday right at the beginning.
Oh, yeah, no,
before
that's
you start paying back.
That's right, isn't it?
So that in the case of an innovation project where you've got a whole load of setup before it's possible to get any return on it, that might give you a bit more mileage there.
I think,
I'll let James confirm.
I think that's okay, Adrian. I think what we would do as any part of any loan agreement, and looking at the application as well, is agree a repayment timescale and profile with the applicant. So I think with specific instances like that, we'd sort of welcome that discussion to look at it. Yeah.
And I think the only thing, I'm being told we need to press on actually as well, but if there are any other questions, then we'll be for about half an hour afterwards anyway. But just the other response to that is, we did say for specific projects there may be 5 years as well, so that may just sort of give that bit of longer. And that's where the board are at. They recognise there are some projects where that investment up front takes longer to return. I will move on to the next one. I'll be able to race through the next one because I've said a lot of it already, and then we'll perhaps have a time for questions. If not, it looks like we won't have, but it doesn't matter. Okay, so this one, very similar to the previous one, but just a slightly subtle twist, and it is focused only on SMEs as well, this one. Okay, so we define those within the document, but focused solely on SMEs, so not larger businesses and not FE institutions for this fund as well. Very similar stuff in terms of the front slide, still capital projects, still 0%. What I will say, so the funding threshold or the loan funding we can provide is between 15k and 99k on this one, and we've got an overall funding pot of £1 million and looking to fund at least 10 projects. That kind of gives you an idea of what we're looking for in this. What we can provide in this one, recognising it's SMEs as well, is up to 80% of total project costs as well, so a lot higher intervention rate than the 50% that we mentioned on the slightly larger fund as well, SMEs only. Same stuff there, as said, and the same stuff around the 5 years apply, or the 12-month holiday period up front apply to this one as well. Sectors are exactly the same there. The only thing that's missing in terms of project impacts here is the unlocking infrastructure one because of the scale of the funding. We thought that was probably unlikely here, so we removed that one from this one. And as I said to you just now, it's not all of these. You don't have to be in all of those sectors. You don't have to create jobs and tackle net zero. It's just one of these. That's all we're sort of saying. And likewise on the next slide as well, you don't have to, your project doesn't have to tackle all or provide progress against all of these priorities. It's at least one of them. Okay, that's still good. This stuff is all exactly the same as well as the previous presentation. So in the interest of time and Alison's stare, I will just go on. But again, it is in the bidding prospectus. The area you'll be familiar with, it's the same as was before. This one is, again, the same, so doing that expression of interest route also. And the only difference here is we've got a business support investment panel of business leaders actually who come together, and they'll be reviewing applications and making the decisions on it. So these won't even go to our LEP board. The board have delegated that to the business support investment panel to lead on that work. I think everything else on there is everything else is exactly the same in terms of timelines, but as I say, that is all detailed in one of the sections of the bidding prospectus. So do I have time for questions at all, Alison? We've got about 1 minute. Okay, we can take, if there's any burning questions, happy to, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
As an SME or a startup, if you have a loan of 100k and you're putting in 100k as well, unless you own the building or something else, you've got to have another 100k in the bank to give you security, in which case you don't really need a loan.
So the security we wouldn't necessarily be looking for sort of cash as security, so it could be an asset that you've got, but slightly different maybe to how you might sort of, go to a bank for funding. Because it's public money, we've got to make sure that money is protected at all times. So we do understand that, but that's just something that we have to put in there, really. Just one other thing that I wanted to clarify, and Stu's right, we're looking at 0% interest, but that is subject to subsidy control and state aid control. We've done them before and we've managed at 0%, but and it does talk a bit more about that in the prospectus, and it will be a lot to put on a slide and talk through now, but just to make you aware that it is subject to that, so I'll just sort of throw that in at the end.
Time for any more? Oh, we're okay. Can't see any more hands. Yeah, we're about. We'll stay about. Okay. Oh, sorry, there's another one. Just take that one.
Do they have to be limited companies, and what sectors, are there any sectors that are excluded from the...
Well, the sector, we haven't... So we want businesses that are in those sectors that were listed on the slides. So that's the ones. If it's a business or a skills initiatives that's tackling that's targeting those sectors, they're fine. Obviously, I haven't listed every excluded sector. It's just you need to be in those sectors. That's the way we've done it. Limited company is yes. Yeah. Okay, we will stop there. Okay. And yeah, brilliant. Okay, brilliant. Cheers.